Okay, I'm going to try to break down practice quiz 5 and 6 for you. Question number 1. There are few, if any, good substitutes for motor oil. Therefore, A, the demand for motor oil would be inelastic. Why inelastic? Because if there's no real substitutes, you're stuck with buying motor oil. So even if they raise the price, quantity demanded will go down a little. I could see them going the other way. There are many substitutes, then it would be elastic, but that's a type of question that's one and done and probably will not come up any other way. If the cross price elasticity of two goods is positive, then these two goods are substitutes, A as an alpha. Now, if you come on the test and you're stuck, I always go with what are the substitutes I know? Coke and Pepsi, okay? So if the price of Coke goes up, people buy less Coke, so the demand for Pepsi goes up. Therefore, they're both going up, they're positive, so that would be a substitute. I would look, and just remember, cross-price elasticity can only tell you A and B. So at worst, you're at a 50-50. So there could be a negative, coefficient, which would be a complement. You could also think they could ask the same question with income elasticity. If it's positive, it's a normal good, meaning income up, demand up, income down, demand down. And if it's negative, it's an inferior good, income up, demand down, income down, demand up. I'd like to point out that on the previous supply and demand test, people did really poorly with questions on inferior goods. So please make sure you understand what an inferior good is. I also think what I just did is a good exercise when you're studying the practice, even if they repeat themselves, and it gives you a good way to remember and review the terms. All right, let's refer to figure 511. When price falls from 50 to 40, okay, it can be inferred that the demand between these two prices is, okay. The first thing I'm going to say is, I know on a line like this, the midpoint around here is going to be unit elastic. This is going to be elastic, because I think E before I. And this is going to be inelastic from the U going down. So I know the answer is going to be elastic from 50 to 40. I could cross out A, I could cross out B, and I could cross out E. Now that leaves me with C and D. All right, if I go from 50 times 100 is, right, is 5,000. 50, I believe, I don't have a calculator with me, is 5,000. Okay. And then the second thing they give me is they give me from 50 to 40. So price is going down, and 40 times 200 is 8,000. So price down, total revenue up. I know, again, that's elastic. I look, elastic, since total revenue increases. Okay, C, as in Caroline, is my answer. All right, so what happened here at 5,000, price went down, total revenue up. Whenever it's inverse like that, I know it's an elastic good. I also knew it was elastic because it was above the midpoint, okay? And then it's the 5,000 to 8,000. So C as in Caroline. Now, looking at this, be able to, do the same thing for an inelastic good, look at, 30 and 10, where at 30, now I have trouble saying, so I'm going to have to look over here at, not 30, rather at 20 and 10. At 20, it'd be 20 times 400, which would be 8,000. And then at 10, and if I'm going across, it's 10 times 500, which would be 5,000. So price down, total revenue down, inelastic. So be wary of them asking like the same question, just with different numbers. And again, know your revenue stressor, which is if they go the same way, they're inelastic. Inverse, it would be elastic. All right. If we scroll down and check question 4. Oh, it's gonna be hard to do it like that. Gotcha. Okay. Question 4. When demand is unit elastic, price elasticity of demand, so it's C as in Caroline, equals 1, and total revenue does not change when price changes. So price could go up and total revenue will go down. Price could go down and total revenue, rather, price could go up or down and total revenue will stay the same. All right. So it's C as in Caroline equals 1 and total revenue does not change. Why is that? That is because if price goes up 10%, quantity demanded goes down 10%. And if price goes down 10%, quantity demanded goes up 10%. So at the end of the day, total revenue, which is price times quantity, will not change. All right, let's see what we have in figure 5.7. Okay. Now, the price is below $6. Again, I know $6 is probably like unit elastic. Above is elastic. Below is inelastic. All right. Now, for the prices below $6, demand, I know it's inelastic. So E is going, C is going, E is going, and now I'm into a 50-50. Now, how about if I forgot the total revenue? I could just figure it out, right? At 6, looks like 6 times 10 is 60. And then I'm going to drop to 4 times 12. 6 times 10 was 60. Price went to 4, so price down. And 4 times 12 is 48. Total revenue down. That's elastic. My answer is B as in broccoli, inelastic, and total revenue will rise as price rises. I did it the other way. I went down. They both go in the same direction. I think we understand that. Now, I could expect a question on elastic, they asking you the same number, but putting it on elastic, knowing that 6 might be unit elastic. Those are the type of questions I would expect here. Okay. If I get this to scroll up a little, maybe not. Okay. The key determinant elasticity of supply is time, and which is A as an alpha. And the reason is like for producers to either build another factory or change what they're making in a factory or like supply more apartments, all that takes a lot of time. So, I mean, I think time is a determinant. You usually go from inelastic to elastic with time. But elasticity definitely increases with time, especially with supply. All right. Number 7, I think, is a real tough one. All right. Let's first do a couple of things with number 7. All right. The supply of aged cheddar is inelastic. Okay. And the supply of bread is elastic. I'll underline that. Both goods are considered to be normal goods by a majority of consumers. That a large income tax decreases the demand. All right. The first thing, elasticity, as far as the shifters, won't matter. So a decrease in demand, either good, what are we going to do? And again, I'm sorry if it's a little sloppy here, because it's hard for me. There's your original equilibrium, P and Q. And now, if we go to P1, okay. And I know this isn't actually answering the question, but price down, quantity down. Okay. So got to be aware that they might ask that in the other question, where all this information doesn't matter except that the demand for both goods decreased. Okay. Now, demand elasticity, right? Percentage change. And what's on the top of all of these? Quantity demanded over the percentage change in price, right? I didn't put the percentage change there, I'm just putting price. Now, we know because the demand for both is decreased by 10%. The quantity demanded is negative 10%. Okay. Elastic good coefficient is an absolute value. We don't need positive or negative, but an elastic good is greater than 1. So denominator here has to be less than 10, right? Let's just say 9. So the price of the elastic good could only increase by 9%. Now, again, both of them demand, right, decreased by 10%. So now let's look at the inelastic good. Again, minus 10% on the top. For it to be less than 1, that number has to be greater than 10 because we're dividing 10 by the, so that has to be 11. So therefore, the inelastic good, the price is going to go up. And this makes sense, right? If they both decrease by the same amount, it has to, inelastic goods are less sensitive. Quantity demand, it goes down less. So the price of has to be greater. So therefore, the answer is A, greater in the aged cheddar market than in the bread market. Okay? So there is how I figured it out. And there is like a diagram in case they ask, what happens to price and quantity? So they could ask a question here, like the same thing. Instead of the change in equilibrium price will be greater in the aged cheddar market. Again, the aged cheddar market is more inelastic. That's the right-hand number. They could ask, what happens to price and quantity in both? Or does, and they both go down, they both decrease, right? Because of the shift in demand, you got price down and quantity down. So that would be the change in equilibrium price and quantity. They both go down. Or they could ask you about price and quantity of one of them. All right, so you're either graphing it or plugging in the numbers there, and that would have got A as an alpha. And I think you should thank me that I put 7 on the practice quiz and not on the real quiz. I think that's a real, at least to me, it was a really hard question. Okay. All right. 8 is kind of a similar question in the scenario, at least. Okay. So let's break down 8 kind of in the same way. Milk, elastic demand. Beef is elastic. Suppose there's a mysterious increase in bovine fertility, both population of dairy cows and the okay. So dairy cows, milk resource, right? You need cows to make milk. cattle to beef resource. So this is decrease in supply, right? Supply is going to be down in, let's see what the question is. The equilibrium quantity will, all right, so I'm just going to graph this out. Okay, this is going to be, we said supply is going to be down because it's a resource and there's less cows and less beef. So I'm going to shift supply left. And what do I get? I get an increase in price and ask me about that. Okay. And get a decrease in quantity. Q1, right? So now they're both going to do the same thing. Whatever happened, like supply is going to shift left in both of them, right? So there's a decrease in the milk market and a decrease in the beef market. D as in dogwood, okay? For quantity to increase, like A, that would have had to be a rightward supply shift. Now, you could be in this question, they could ask you again, which price would increase, would go down more. The inelastic, if they both decrease by 50%, the inelastic price, which is milk, will, the price will be bigger, the decrease in the price. Okay. All right. Assume there's an increase in supply and demand. All right. Double shifter. All right. Again, excuse me for not labeling everything, but here, my first shift, I'm going to go with the demand. They said an increase. So here's my P and my original Q. I got P up here and Q up here. All right, so for the demand, a price up, quantity up. Now I got to make a separate graph for supply, because they said an increase in demand and supply. My second graph, I'm going to get supply to increase here. So here's my original equilibrium, price and quantity. All right. Now, price went down. Okay. Quantity increase. So price down, right? We know that anytime there's a double shifter, there'll be one indeterminate. All right, so quantity is going up in both. We don't know what's going on with price. The answer for 9 is E. Will have an indeterminate effect on equilibrium price, but it increase in the equilibrium quantity. All right, now it could give you a double shifter, with supply and demand going down. I think if you know the double shifter, that's how I broke it down, 2 graphs and looking at what happens to price and quantity. You should be okay in that respect. All right, number 10. Okay, this is like third type of question where you had to know elastic, P is unit elastic, and inelastic. All right, section of the demand curve from B to C. All right, we know that's in the inelastic section of the demand curve, B as in broccoli. All right, so please get that straight for the quiz. Let's see if there are any more practice questions. No. All right, that's it. 4, 5. Let's see, could I get quiz? Quiz 6. Right, this is quiz 6. All right. So the first question, in a competitive market free of government regulation, price adjusts until quantity demanded equals quantity supply. So if there's no price controls, we're always going to get to the equilibrium where quantity demanded equals quantity supply. Okay, rent control, all right, laws dictate, and that's B as in broccoli, a maximum rent that landlords may charge. All right, it's a maximum. It doesn't dictate the exact, it's a maximum rent. I would look for minimum wage. That's the opposite. Minimum wage is the minimum that employers could pay. Rent control being a price ceiling, minimum wage being a price floor. Okay. Another thing to think about is for rent control, maybe a question about short versus long run. In the short run, both supply and demand are inelastic. Supply is inelastic because landlords, they have leases, they can't knock down their buildings, they've been taking care of the building in a certain way, so everything's fairly going to stay the same. In the long run, they might stop renting out like apartments. They might knock them down and sell the land if they don't think they're making as much money. And they're surely not going to upkeep the apartment as well because they're getting paid less. So they're going to cut money. So the quality you're getting is going to be less. So it's going to make supply more elastic in the long run. Demand in the short run is also inelastic. I might see apartments for cheaper rent, but I have a lease and I can't break that lease. So I'm stuck where I am. But once those lease expires, as we get to the long run, then we're going to have a great demand for these lower rent apartments that people are going to want. So I could see a question about it's elastic, inelastic for both of them in the short run, and more elastic for both of them in the long run. For a price ceiling to be binding in this market, it would have to be. So an upside down house, my ceiling has to be below the equilibrium. So it's A, any price below the equilibrium. Now, there's a couple of questions. They could ask, for a price floor to be binding, it'd be any price above the equilibrium. They could ask for shortages, which will be below the equilibrium. And let's just do shortage at $5 just to. I think they could ask another question at $5, but we'll do the shortage here and then we'll do the other question. All right, $5. If you look at the shortage, quantity demanded at $5 would be 60, right? And quantity supplied would be 40. So we'd have a shortage of 20. And again, they could ask these questions at any price. But I think if you realize where this crosses, that is 60 going down, and where this crosses, that is 40, and the difference is 60 minus 40 is 20. And they could also ask it like at $9, for a price floor. Now, the second type of question they could ask here is, what happens if the price ceiling's at $7? Well, therefore, it's not binding. So therefore, you're going to have no shortage or surplus, because you're going to be right back to the equilibrium where 60 is both, where 6 equals 50 for quantity demanded and quantity supply. All right. Now, the next question, 4, suppose a price ceiling of $5 a buyer's total expenditure. All right. So $6 before the price ceiling total expenditure was 6 times 50. Now, we did some good practice on this in class about expenditures. I'm hoping we know it's price times quantity. That's 300. Now, what happens to the expenditure with the ceiling? Well, the price ceiling is binding. We know that it's below $6 at $5. Go to, all right, now people want 60, but we only have 40 to sell. So that's all we're going to sell. It's going to be 5 times 40. So consumers are now only spending 200, and they used to spend 300. Let's see, is there an answer there? Buyers' total expenditure in the good decreases by 100, right? They used to spend 300. Now they're spending 200. Let's look at the distractors. The quantity of the goods supplied decreases by 20 units. Well, no, they used to supply 50 at the equilibrium. Now they're supplying 40. That's only 10 units. The demand curve doesn't shift. We figured out C's the answer. The price of the good continues to serve. No, it's not a rationing mechanism means like you're going to get to equilibrium. You can't get to equilibrium. You're stuck at $5 legally. The quantity of goods supplied, the quantity of goods supplied decreases. All right, so C is the answer. Now, I would look to be able to do 3 and 4 for both price ceilings and price floors. And be weary. Say like this was a price floor at $5. And they said, then the answer would be buyer's total expenditure stays the same because we'd stay at the equilibrium of $6 if at $5 was a price floor. So make sure you know it's binding. And remember, if it's not binding, say they said that was a price floor, we would just erase everything and we're right back at the equilibrium. Okay. Scroll down a couple. All right, number 5. If a non-binding price ceiling is opposed on a market, then quantity sold in the market will stay the same because nothing has happened. All right. If it's non-binding, it's going to be right back to the equilibrium. We talked about that kind of in the last thing. If government removes a binding price ceiling, all right, I'm going to just scroll back here. Let's put in a binding price ceiling. Okay. Now, if government removes this, we're going to move back to the equilibrium, right? Let's look what's going to happen. Price is going to increase, right? We're going to move from 4 to 6. Quantity supplied is going to go from 30 to 50. So quantity supply is going to increase. And that makes sense, right? Because the price increases, we know quantity supply increases. And quantity demanded is going to go from 70 to 50. So quantity demanded is going to go down. All right, we have these 3. Let's go now that I used that graph, let's go back down and see if the government removes binding price ceiling from the market by buyer's will. So the price paid by buyers will A, increase, and that we know. So B, C, rather C, D, and E is out. Will increase, and the quantity sold in the market will increase, right? Because let's get back here. The quantity sold, say, at $4 was only 30. But now, the quantity sold at $6 is going to be 50. All right. So I would just graph those. Now, again, you could have a similar one there with just different numbers, like they could, or they could remove a price floor and ask you what happens to quantity sold, or they could ask here, like when I put, like what happened, they could ask what would happen, that same situation, what would happen to quantity demanded? Quantity demanded would decrease. What would happen to quantity supplied? It would increase. So the key, I think, to doing that would be graphing it like I did, looking at the graph and seeing what happens to quantity demanded and quantity supplied. All right, rent control below serves as a price ceiling. Okay, a legal minimum on the price at which a good can be sold is called a price floor. I think those, we should know those, but that's it. Which of the following is correct? Rent control is an example of a price ceiling. Yeah, because that's the highest you could sell it. It has to be below the equilibrium to be binding. And minimum wage is an example of a price floor. It has to be above the equilibrium to be binding. A minimum wage that is set below a market equal. All right. So if it's set below, it's not binding. So an excess demand for labor, no. Quantity demanded is going to equal quantity supply. There is no excess. An excess demand for labor, no. There is no shortage of labor. Quantity demanded equals quantity supply. Supply is the supply of labor. Demand is how many workers people want. They're going to equal each other. An excess, no, there's not going to be an excess supply. If you supply 50, quantity demanded is going to be 50 because you're going to be at the equilibrium. All above are not correct. None of the above are correct for as we talked ourselves through. Okay. All right. Now, table 6.1. Which of the following floors would be binding? All right. The first thing is let's find the equilibrium. Quantity demanded at 6 equals quantity. So that's 3. All right. For floor to be binding, we have to be greater, right, than 3. So it'd be E as an element. All right. Look, 0, 1, and 2, they're all the same. They're below the equilibrium. They all can't be the answer. So just test skills would say E is. So for the floor to be great, now they could say if the price floor is 5, what is the surplus? So at 5, it's 10 minus 2 would give you 8. Okay. They could say if the price floor is 1, what is the surplus? Well, at 1, the floor is non-binding because it's not greater than 3. So there is no surplus because 6 equals 6. All right. Now, of course, they could ask about a price ceiling. Price ceiling has to be under 3. Say if they say a price ceiling is 2, it is binding. And then we have a shortage. People want 8. We only have 4. They could give you a price ceiling of 6 that isn't binding. So you're going to have 6 equals 6. You can go back to the equilibrium and there is no shortage. There is no surplus. Okay. Number 12, suppose the government imposes a price floor of $5. All right. The equilibrium is 3. So $5 would be a binding price floor. What will the size of the surplus be? So I'm going at 5. Quantity supplied is 10 minus 2. It's going to be C as in Caroline, 8 units. I hope the breakdown helped. If you have any questions, plus if you can't get in touch with me, please email me. Thank you.